We all love a good final girl. Laurie Strode, Sally Hardesty and Ellen Ripley are absolute legends. Just makes us hate annoying final girls even more though. I'm Tilly from What Culture Horror and these are the 10 most annoying final girls in horror movie history. Number 10. Nathalie. Birdemic, Shock and Terror. James Noonan's infamous romantic horror about an army of killer birds with acidic blood was gripping, terrifying, and wrapped up with a plethora of immersive visuals. Okay, so maybe it's not the best film ever made. However, even in a movie ranked as the 5th worst of all time according to IMDb, final girl Nathalie manages to stand out as a real low point. Wooden and whiny are not the best qualities for a horror movie final girl, but there are few out there who nail both of these traits quite like Nathalie. An apparent lingerie model who supposedly lands the gig of a lifetime with Victoria's Secret, Nathalie goes throughout the entire film either delivering out of place lines, complaining about something, or going the complete opposite way and being this unstoppable force of positivity when it couldn't be more obvious that this isn't the time for it. Whitney Moore portrays Nathalie in both Birdemic, Shock and Terror and its sequel Birdemic Resurrection, though undoubtedly very few people have managed to stomach her in both performances. Number 9. Laurie, Freddy vs. Jason. The general consensus about Freddy vs. Jason is that for a showdown between two of horror's biggest baddies, it's a pretty wild ride, but everything else in the film is pretty awful. The visuals are painfully early 2000s, and its characters, other than Freddy or Jason, are some of the most annoying the genre has ever thrown up. And Final Girl Laurie is the worst of the worst. Part of the new generation of Elm Street teens who had forgotten about Freddy Krueger and his crimes, Laurie is one of those characters who audiences probably forgot was there until the group begins to be whittled down by the killers. She spends all of her screen time drifting off into the background or murmuring some gibberish about the situation at hand, hardly contributing anything helpful to either the other characters or the audience watching on. Seriously, just try and listen to her. Freddy died by fire. Jason died by water. How can we use that? I don't know, Laurie, how about you try using your brain? Or, welcome to my world, bitch. These lines give you an idea of exactly why Laurie makes her way onto this list. Number 8. RIOS, The Descent Part 2. One of the biggest reasons why The Descent was such a great entry into the horror genre was its all-female cast. Every single member of the group of friends who delved deep into the North Carolina mountains was both likeable and extremely resourceful, with all of them being given enough screen time to show off their personalities and convey these things naturally. And while the sequel does try to recapture a lot of that magic by bringing back the two main characters from the group in Sarah and Juno, it falls flat on its face when it comes to the likes of Ellen Rios, technically the film's final girl. Introduced as a local sheriff deputy who joins up with the next batch of would-be crawler victims, Rios has very little going for her in terms of development and only really exists in the film as someone Sarah can lead around and explain what's going on to. She absolutely disappears when she's next to the two final girls from the original, and the fact she's the last one standing out of the entire group is genuinely staggering. The Descent Part 2's ending might be controversial for horror fans, but seeing Rios tossed back to the crawlers at the end is certainly a moment most audiences can absolutely get behind. Number 7. Michelle, Leatherface, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Out of all the films in the Texas Chainsaw series, the third entry might just be the most forgettable one going. It doesn't have the low-budget documentary style of the original, the gloss of the Leatherface prequel, or the dark comedy of Texas Chainsaw 2. It doesn't even have the insanity of the next generation to keep us at least interested. It's literally just another charmless look at the depravity of Leatherface and the Sawyer family. Sadly, its characters are also some of the most forgettable in the series as well, with final girl Michelle coming in as one of the worst of these. Introduced as being stuck up and disloyal to her boyfriend, Michelle is constantly moaning as her road trip through the Texan countryside begins to go wrong. She goes from whiny to disappearing altogether when the real hero of the film, Benny, turns up. Michelle is pretty much just a character the writers can use to put through the usual dosage of misery and torture that all the films in the series end up relying on. There's not a lot going on with Michelle to root for to begin with, and certainly no arc or development to be seen in the film that will make audiences want to root for her, rather than Leatherface and co. Number 6. Angela Vidal, Quarantine. Rec was a 2007 Spanish film that helped revitalise the found footage subgenre. Tense, terrifying, and filled with charismatic characters, it established a legacy as one of the finest releases of its time, spawned its very own franchise, and in Quarantine, its very own remake as well, for better or worse. Some of Rec's co-writers openly expressed their displeasure at just how much of a rip-off Quarantine was of the original. The fact that the film's final girl, Angela Vidal, is another reporter exploring an apartment building filled with people infected with a strange strand of rabies just goes to show how far the similarities stretch. Unfortunately for Quarantine, the only thing it manages to stand out with against the original is just how bland of a character its lead really is. Angela is one of those final girls who offers next to nothing constructive to the team during the runtime, but does at least boast an infuriating amount of time breathing down the camera and then screaming like a hapless damsel in distress. Number 5. Nancy Holbrook, A Nightmare on Elm Street. The 2010 remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street was released during the peak of the horror movie remake craze and is easily one of the worst examples of it at work. Jackie Earle Haley gives it his all as Freddy, but the darker tone and rehashing of all the things the original did perfectly fine in the first place just make this film feel unnecessary more than anything else. The OG Nancy Thompson might just be one of the best final girls of all time. However, her replacement, Rooney Mara's Nancy Holbrook, is about as far away as it gets to being among the best. In this version of Nightmare, Nancy has gone from likeable, resourceful and competent to literally the opposite of all these things. Broody and constantly banging on about how she doesn't fit in anywhere. Nancy is led through all the film's developments first by Jesse, then Quentin, and barely goes through anything resembling development over the course of the film. Number 4. Donna KEPPEL, Prom Night. A wannabe remake of the 1980 classic, Prom Night is the story of a young woman named Donna KEPPEL who is hunted down by her former teacher, a man named Richard Fenton, years after he had become obsessed with her and murdered her entire family. Brittany Snow plays the final girl, but her performance really crowns off a film that feels far more like a teen drama than an outright bloody slasher flick. The whole film is filled to the brim with Donna turning around and crying and complaining, two traits audiences would expect to see in one of the first victims to get the chop, and not the main hero to follow for the story. The original Prom Night is renowned for its pretty dull story, but its remake really manages to push this to a new level of snorefest. The PG-13 rating for this film certainly doesn't help sell the tension of the situation, which only makes the constant crying coming from Donna all the more infuriating to see throughout the runtime. On top of all of this, Donna doesn't even manage to sandwich in a victory over her own stalker in the film, with Idris Elba's Detective Wynn stealing that honour during the film's finale. Number 3. Sarah MOYER, Halloween Resurrection. Killing off one of the most accomplished actors to ever appear in the franchise, and the best final girl during its run in the opening 10 minutes, doesn't put Halloween Resurrection in the best starting spot. But Laurie Strode's replacement, Sarah MOYER, really helps hammer the nail into its coffin. Portrayed by Bianca Kajlik in the 2002 disaster of a movie, Sarah is the only female university student to survive the Michael Myers reality show, and is again just another character the writers want everyone to think is edgy and different to everyone else. There are subtler and more interesting ways for a screenwriter to do that other than just have a character mop their hair in front of their face, give the odd weird expression, retorted remark, or just spend the entire film looking really sad, but sadly that memo didn't seem to reach Resurrection's writers. Halloween Resurrection is one of the best examples of Hollywood's love for pointless sequels in full effect, and Sarah's character does absolutely nothing to justify things either. Number 2. The girl/Princess Gemstone, Laid to Rest. 2009's Laid to Rest was a decent enough low-budget slasher film, though most of the good points about the movie came from its sinister villain, Chrome Skull. However, it's so often the way in the world of horror that a brilliant baddie can bring out the terrible in a terrible final girl, and that is sadly the case with the girl/Princess Gemstone in Laid to Rest. The girl spends the entire film in this constant cat and mouse game with Chrome Skull. He chases her to a location, she fends him off and runs away, he follows her and tries again, and so on and so forth. All in all, this formula leaves very little time for anything resembling development or an arc for Princess, and Bobby Sue Luther's pretty questionable acting the whole time doesn't help the character's appeal too much either. Given that this was also a movie that had Lena Headey killed off in the opening stages, there's no escaping thinking what could have been. Laid to Rest has a great villain, some solid visuals for a movie so indie, and a bunch of impressive special effects, but they're all pretty wasted when there's such a wooden final girl screaming and running away from them all the time. And number 1. Bridget, Leprechaun 2. Most of the final girls from the Leprechaun series could have a shot at making their way onto this list. Such is the quality of writing on show in the franchise, but there's just something so undeniably irritating about everything in Leprechaun 2 that it edges out all other competition. The film responsible for pushing the franchise direct to video, Leprechaun 2 doesn't have any of the so bad it's good comedy or wacky storylines and settings that the franchise would become known for, just the exact same plot as the original. And they don't come more detestable than Bridget, the film's final girl who sadly manages to survive the Little Green Tearaway. Introduced as a whiny girlfriend who sabotages her boyfriend's job because he had to cancel their date due to work, Bridget then leaves said boyfriend that very night for literally the first man that looked at her, is then captured by Leprechaun, fails to escape twice, then jumps back to her boyfriend when he rescues them as if nothing ever happened. It's rare to find selfish, mean, and helpless all in the same final girl, but by God does Bridget in Leprechaun 2 manage to do it. And that's our list. Any final girls you wanted to take out before the killer even did? Let us know down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe and swing on by our channel again if you want to catch more creepy content. I've been Tilly and this has been What Culture. Thanks for watching, look after yourselves, keep safe and keep well. Until next time.